Well, I think that we're trained that way to a certain degree too, to like just sort of maintain the status quo,
Yep.
right? Like, so I think that conventional thinking is when something is weak, you need to do strengthening for it. If
Yeah.
something is tight, you need to do stretching for it.
Yeah.
If you have pain somewhere, you're probably just overdoing it or you don't stretch enough. And it's kind of like a reductionist way of looking at these things, and I think oversimplified.
Yeah.
And with any one of those things, I think you should ask why, right? Why am I tight? Why am I weak?
Yeah.
Why is this thing why is this like a repetitive strain or overstress kind of injury,
Yeah.
right? Like, am I working it too much or is there something else going on?
Okay, here we go. We're recording. Okay, so for anyone watching this, listening in, this is our first time doing a bit of an interview with one of our therapists, so please go easy on us as it's our first time around. I've got Paul with me here today, and we're going to be chatting about the correlation between strength and possibly weakness as well, and pain, and how it just might be an avenue that you haven't explored yet to help resolve some of your pain. So let's just introduce ourselves. Paul, do you want to jump in and you can go first, and then I'll introduce myself after?
Sure. So if I have not yet met anyone here, then my name is Paul. I'm a massage therapist. I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years now. I have a specialty in active release technique and a background in kinesiology and personal training. And I think that that experience has lent itself well to what I do now as a therapist, just seeing it from that background.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm Lindsey Langless. I'm the owner and director of Competitive Edge Sport Therapy. We've been around. Tomorrow, believe it or not, is our 7-year anniversary of the clinic opening, and the business has been around 9 years. Now that we got those numbers straight, right, Paul? And we're sure about how long we've been open, 7 years in the clinic, 9 years in total. And at Competitive Edge, we specialize in helping active adults and athletes who are suffering with pain and injury. And most of the time they've been to see more traditional forms of therapy, and they've tried more traditional massage or your traditional physio experience, and they haven't seen results from it. And they're still experiencing pain, and they sort of feel at their wits' end when finally they stumble upon us and they find us, and we're that fresh new approach, able to give them a different look at their pain to find the real root cause and resolve the real root cause, and help them feel better and get back to living the life that they want to be living. So that's a little bit about us and what we do at Competitive Edge. I am originally an athletic therapist, and just recently taken on the full role of clinic director, and focusing on business. So not seeing clients anymore, but that's where my background is. So should we just jump right in? The correlation between strength and weakness and pain, and how it might be something that someone in pain might not have considered yet. So what are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, I think just when you said it that way, it kind of says it right there, that very, very often when people have pain, they have a weakness that's strongly associated. Yeah. So it could be that maybe they have like, a muscle that hurts and, that muscle is weak. Or it could be that they have a joint that's causing them pain or that's injured in some way. And then the muscles that surround and support that joint are also weak. And so from my experience, I find that it's extremely rare to find someone who's super strong that has a ton of pain, right? Even in an athlete, somebody who's very capable, they'll often have weaknesses associated with their pain. Mm-hmm. Have you probably found the same thing?
So it's not, for you, it's not about the whole body being strong, it's about areas not being strong.
It can
if
be
we look at like a power lifter, for example, who's lifting a whole bunch of weight but has knee pain, do you think that it's not necessarily a whole body thing, but an area?
Yeah, definitely it can be areas, right? Like, so a lot of the times it'll be stabilizing muscles. I think that when you look at the world of rehabilitation, coming from a background of like physiotherapy, athletic therapy, personal training, you name it, we're always like targeting these little accessory muscles that often just kind of get overlooked and neglected. So you do see it there, but you can see it in the prime movers sometimes as well, where it might be the muscle that needs to be the big, strong muscle to execute the majority of the motion can be affected too. But often it's the little stabilizers that kind of create the faults in motion.
I think that's maybe the difficult thing for people to conceptualize, is that this strength weakness problem comes in all shapes and sizes and forms and different areas and different muscle groups. Like you were saying, it could be the smaller supportive muscles or the big ones, big prime movers, and there is no cookie cutter formula. Whereas I think as human beings, we always want that like quick, easy answer. If you've got knee pain, it's probably that, you know, X muscle is weak. And at least in my experience, I wonder if it's in yours as well, I find that that's not the case, that it's so different for every person, and there is no like cookie cutter formula to give people. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. Yeah, that it's highly individual, and I don't think that there's like a single prescription that works for everybody. Like, you know, everybody do rotator cuff exercises and core exercises and glute exercise. It's not as simple as that.
Yeah. And while we're on that topic, I think that's why some more traditional forms of rehab fail sometimes, because it's like everyone who comes in gets this knee program and they all do the same 5 exercises in the knee program. And that might work for 25% of the people, but the other 75% are, you know, in a different category with different imbalances and different things going on, and it doesn't work for the other 75%, just to put a random number on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why coming to a place like ours can be so special, because no one gets the exact same program. It's literally different for every person because we're all different. No 2 people are made the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you find that people have a hunch or have an instinct when they might have a weakness or an instability?
It's probably 50-50. I do see a lot of people who will say things like, I don't feel like I can activate my glutes, or I know I have a weak core, or, you know, something like that. I do see those people. And then I see a lot of people who are just completely unaware, because it can be insidious, right? Like, let's say that if you are really active and maybe you do push-ups or bench press or whatever, you might not realize that you have like weak external rotators, because it's just not something that you are very aware of, or that you test or train a lot. You know, so that just could be one example where often the little accessory motions, maybe people have a little bit less awareness of.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been known to say to people that I think we spend too much time in our brains and not enough time in our bodies. And we're thinking our thoughts and we're caught up in our own narrative in our brain, and we lose touch with what our bodies are doing. I've met people that don't even know if their spine is straight or not. They don't even really know how to move their spine in the ways that I've asked them to do it, let alone, well, what muscles are activating when you move your spine. Like, that's just so far advanced what they can feel in their own body. I have personally found that some people, like, that's step number 1. It's just feeling your body, just feeling what a movement feels like, getting more in tune with sometimes your pain, what makes it worse, what makes it better, like, learn from it. Don't just shut it out all the time. And then once you can feel what your body's doing, then we can, okay, well, can you feel how your glutes not activating? You know, and build upon that. But in my experience, I find people have no idea that those muscle groups are weak. And some people are actually even defensive about it. Like, what do you mean I'm weak? Do you find that as well?
Yeah, there can be like an element of ego to it, or like sometimes there's a bit of a lack of understanding.
Yeah. And like you said, the understanding that it's not necessarily, we're not saying your whole body is weak necessarily, just that this one tiny little muscle or this one muscle group or something, or this one direction might be weak.
You know, what it makes me think about is actually the thing that I'm the most passionate about when it comes to looking at muscle function, muscle strength, and muscle weakness when things don't go right, is the reason why people have weakness. That's the thing I'm really passionate about, because to me, that speaks to the root cause. And I think that when we start understanding why people have weaknesses, then we can kind of get our egos out of the way and just understand what the mechanism is, and then take an approach to correct it, and then fix things and regain function and regain strength. And to me, that's really exciting.
I wonder if not enough people are asking that question. Why?
I think that's a fundamental question with everything in life, right?
I
But
think a lot of
particularly
people
in
just want
rehab.
to think, well, it hurts here, so can't you just push on it and make it feel better? Or can't I just take a pill and it'll feel better? Or, maybe it's human nature to want that quick fix. But it's a lot harder to contemplate why. And I wonder if maybe people aren't deep diving into their pain quite that much to contemplate why. And they're just like, yeah, give me the quick solution.
Well, I think that we're trained that way to a certain degree too, to like just sort of maintain the status quo.
Yep.
Right? Like, so I think that conventional thinking is when something is weak, you need to do strengthening for it. If something is tight, you need to do stretching for it.
Yeah.
If you have pain somewhere, you're probably just overdoing it or you don't stretch enough. And it's kind of like a reductionist way of looking at these things. And I think oversimplified.
Yeah.
And with any one of those things, I think you should ask why, right? Why am I tight? Why am I weak? Why is this thing why is this like a repetitive strain or overstress kind of injury?
Yeah.
Right? Like, am I working it too much or is there something else going on?
Yeah. Do you ever have any pushback from people that don't want to strengthen those areas that need to be strengthened and they just want you to, just press on the spot that hurts?
Definitely. Yeah, that happens a lot. And I think that the important thing is just to try to do a good job of educating people on why, and the better you can do that, the more people can be helped. But,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe we've already covered this, but what do you find are some of the common mistakes that you see people make when they have pain that's related to, lack of strength or some weakness in an area?
Well, I can tell you the mistake that I made, because I think that's what most people will also run into is thinking that you can just strengthen your way out of it.
Okay.
So years ago, I used to get shoulder pain all the time. And I believed that I had some weak accessory muscles, right? So the rotator cuff muscles were too weak and the scapular stabilizing muscles were too weak and that sort of thing, right? So I thought, okay, if I can make my rotator cuff and my upper back and this and that, if I can make these muscles stronger and train them more, that'll fix my shoulder pain.
Yeah.
And I tried that and I did all these little exercises and I would spend whole workouts doing rotator cuff strengthening and all these different things. And I found that I just got mediocre results, right? And I think that that's what a lot of other people probably experience too.
Yeah.
So to me, the big thing that nobody really knows about that I didn't learn from school, but I've kind of learned it from colleagues and from life experience and that sort of thing, is that muscles aren't just weak in most cases, right? What's actually going on is that muscles get impaired neurologically. So there's a lot of different mechanisms in the body, whether it's coming from joints or nerve compression or strain or any number of different mechanisms in the body that impair the nervous system and therefore impair muscle strength.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people see things as just weakness. And so weakness, you've got to strengthen, right? But if you've got something that's inhibited, then the logic would be that you need to uninhibit it, right? So in the body, the way that I find it works is when there's a dysfunction in the body, it acts like a dimmer switch that turns down the signal to the muscle and creates weakness. And if you know what that dimmer switch is, what the mechanism is in the body, you treat the dysfunction and it's like you turn the signal back up and you can restore strength instantly. And so that's what I try to do with my treatments, is because I'm not treating true weakness, I'm treating impairments.
Yeah.
And making the body more functional. And so inhibited muscles are somewhat responsive to training. Like if you do exercises to strengthen stuff, they'll get a little bit better, but it's really easy to know where your limit is. And sometimes doing too much will actually injure those inhibited muscles. And, in a lot of cases, things will just be unresponsive. Where maybe a muscle should get a whole lot stronger when you do this exercise, but really like very little actually happens.
Yeah.
And that's because the switch is turned down, right? It's like you've got this dimmer switch effect on the muscle. And so that's really your root cause that needs to be resolved.
And I find that's really eye-opening, especially for the people that are resistant. Like, what do you mean I'm not weak? And you're like, well, but you're not weak in the way you think I'm saying you're weak. You're weak as in the muscle just literally can't do what it needs to do. It doesn't have the capacity to turn on and turn off the way that it's supposed to. And you could do that exercise, you could do those deadlifts till the cows come home. And like you said, that's only going to give you so much progress. And then they're like, oh, so it's not my fault. I haven't done anything wrong. It's just how my body's working or possibly not working to the best of its ability right now.
And I just find that often when you try to force it, you'll actually create more problems.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is I want to like repeat back to you what I just heard in a really simplified way, and you can tell me whether that's your same sort of definition of an inhibition or not, because I want to really simplify it for anyone that's listening in that might, the word inhibition might be like, what the heck?
It's not part of our vocabulary.
No.
Because we've been trained for years and years that things are weak or things are tight. And that's it. Yeah. There's another option though.
Yeah, so what I've found in the way that I've described it to people before, again, it might be different from how you've described it, is that it could be one of two things. If we really want to like break it down just into two categories, it could be that the signal from the nerve goes from your brain down through the nervous system, needs to get to the muscle. It can't get through. There's, like you said, some sort of impingement, pressure on a nerve, something like that, blocking that signal from getting down. And then on the flip side, it could be that your brain's sort of compensating or a little confused, as in you're supposed to use muscle A, but your brain has gotten used to the fact that when it uses muscle A, it also uses muscle B, and it uses them at the same time all the time. Meanwhile, muscle B is doing its job and also the job of muscle A. So it's getting really, really tired because it's activating way more than it should. Whereas if you can teach the brain to do something differently, teach it how to engage muscle A on its own in isolation, but also teach muscle B, you only have to do your job, not everyone else's job. They can both work independently as they're supposed to without one underworking and one overworking. Again, that might be like a really simplified version of it, but does that sound like the same thing as what you're describing?
I think conceptually, yeah, I think that's pretty consistent. But what you just described with how maybe one muscle is not doing its job sufficiently, so another muscle compensates, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the ways that weaknesses cause injury or cause pain is through compensatory patterns, right? So that might mean that, like if you have weak inhibited glutes, maybe you start to stress the quadriceps more or the hip rotators, or, whatever it is, right? Maybe if your biceps were inhibited, maybe you'll start over recruiting your forearm muscles, or whatever the compensatory mechanism is. It's one of the ways that we get pain is because when you have weakness, something is going to compensate because our bodies are pretty good at adapting, right? And finding a way to just get stuff done, whether that's like limping along or, throwing something with a little bit more momentum or whatever the compensation might be. Yeah. We're really good at getting it done.
Absolutely. Our bodies are amazing. When you stop and think about that just how many different ways it can come up to compensate, to help you still make it through day to day, it's amazing what it can do. Not always the best for our long-term health, but in the short term, like I've told people before that your body still thinks that you're a caveman that needs to run from a saber-toothed tiger. So if you're needing to sprint away and your glute, for example, doesn't activate, your body's not going to be like, well, I guess we're dinner tonight. Like it'll find a way to help you sprint away from that threat that it feels like it needs to escape from. And that might be using your hamstring instead or overusing your low back muscles or something like that. And it doesn't care in the short term because it thinks it's saving your life. And that might be helpful in the short term. However, it keeps doing that. It was like, hey, that was a good compensation. That saved my life. I'm going to keep doing it some more. Fast forward 5 years or 10 years. And that's a real problem. If only we could tell our bodies we're not being chased by any tigers, we're okay. We might be a little bit better off, but.
Yeah. So compensation is one of the main ones. And then another really simple one is just strains. Like how many people have some sort of either an acute strain where they just tried to lift something too heavy. It was just, you know, kind of like a bad moment versus repetitive strains where somebody does something over and over again, like typing or running or whatever their job is. They might have a repetitive job or something like that. But when you have weaknesses, it kind of makes the stresses of our activities much more stressful, right? So if you're just trying to resolve something simple like a strain, then having more strength makes your stress level lower. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes the movement easier to do because it's not challenging you quite so much all the time. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So if you're twice as strong, then the activity that you have to do would be half as difficult.
Yeah.
So it's like a relatively decreased stress on the body.
Yeah.
So that's another really common one.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what someone should do if they're hearing all of this and thinking, well, that sounds like me. I probably do have some inhibited muscles or some weaknesses. What should be sort of like step one and also sort of like the long-term game plan for them?
You know, it's very difficult to just figure all this stuff out on your own. You know, it's hard to identify where weaknesses might exist.
Yeah.
And certainly it's even tougher to kind of like solve the big puzzle that this can all be, because there's a lot of like strange interconnectedness in the body where like a weakness in one area might come from some completely different part of the body. You know, you've probably seen that before.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
where
sometimes
like maybe something in your neck might be making something in your hip weak or something strange like that, right?
It's
so
strange the things our body comes up with.
so it's complicated for one thing, and it's very hard to like analyze and solve your own problem. So I think the best thing for people to do is to get some help with that, get some guidance. And so I would recommend a functional assessment, right? That's something that I do very often, is kind of muscle test people and look at how are their muscles working. And because I understand where weaknesses come from, I can kind of help solve the puzzle and help them figure out how to regain strength and function.
Yeah.
But it's very tough to fix that on your own. And like just, it's not always just a lack of doing the right exercises.
Yeah. So see an expert, figure out exactly what the problem is for you. Because like we said earlier, your body is different than everyone else's body. And then that expert will give you a game plan. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah. And to be honest, even among experts, there's very few who treat function.
Yeah.
Right? So much of the treatment that we get, and I'm sure you can relate to this, and anybody listening can probably relate to this. You know, you go and you see a professional and you tell them that you have pain somewhere and they rub the spot that hurts.
Yep.
Right? You know, or they stick a needle in it, or they do some modality on it, or maybe they give you an exercise to strengthen it or stretch it. And that's all you get, and you don't really understand why you have that problem at all.
Yep.
So it's very difficult to get the right kind of guidance, even among very smart professionals, because again, it's kind of the old school way of treating is much more symptom-based, not really addressing root cause, even though people like to make that claim.
Yeah.
It's hard to really do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you touch maybe just briefly on, you said seek out someone that does, did you say a functional assessment? Is that the term?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does that mean? Is that looking for a massage therapist or someone else or what?
Well, I would say it's, you know, if you see a traditional massage therapist, most of them are not going to do a whole lot in the way of assessment. You'll just lay on the table and get rubbed with lotion for an hour, and it'll feel great, right?
It's nice if that's what you're going for.
But it's usually it's not going to be a very intensive assessment.
Yeah.
So with the method that I use, I test muscles for their strength, and then I'll do some treatment and retest, and that will confirm whether the treatment is doing anything to restore function.
Yeah.
Right. So primarily the kind of method that I use is a lot of manual muscle testing, because it's just really quick and gives really rapid feedback. It's very practical. You don't need a lot of fancy equipment or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the results can be really dramatic, and it can be very revealing, right? Like, let's say if you have like knee pain, and then you see that your glutes are super, super weak. Yeah. It's pretty compelling, right? Like it makes a strong case or a strong connection for like, I see how having this weakness could lead to this pain. And so if I could fix this weakness, I might alleviate this pain. Like it makes a good way to kind of make that logical step.
Yeah. It's sort of mind blowing the first time you experience something like that, when a therapist tests a muscle and you're like, I can't even fight back against you. I feel so weak.
Yeah.
And then they treat something and they retest you and you just feel like the Hulk. You feel so strong.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't break you if they wanted to. And it's literally that fast within minutes, that you can just flip that coin and go from feeling weak to feeling strong. It's really amazing.
It's a fantastic feeling. You know, like I can say that anytime that I've been, you know, assessed and treated, and I get that feeling where I get a muscle test and it just collapses and it hurts and my ego feels crushed and all this. And then after treatment, when they, you know, I get retested and I just feel like super solid and my pain is gone. And I'm like, all right, this is the real me. This is how I should be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a great feeling, like a feeling of confidence that you can go out and like do the things that you want to do in your life. You know, you can train, you could, you know, do your chores or play with your kids or whatever. And you feel like you've just got like a degree of confidence that you actually, you dealt with the problem. You didn't just mask it over with just rubbing the spot that hurts.
Yeah.
You know, and then you've got like a confidence in your, you know, your strength and stability and that sort of thing. So I think it's a great feeling. So.
Yeah. So going back to my question about finding an expert that can help them if they think they've got pain that's related to some weakness or inhibition or something like that. It sounds like you were saying to really sort of do your research about the person and make sure that they are someone that specializes in, you know, functional assessment or, you know, finding inhibitions, that sort of thing. So it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm interpreting you here, but instead of just looking for their profession, instead sort of diving into more about that person as a therapist and how they treat and what their goal is?
You know, I think that it's just important, like you said earlier, just asking why, right? If you have a therapist that you like, just ask questions through your treatment. And I think most therapists like us love to talk about why we're doing things and would be happy to share it with you.
Yeah.
But I think if you just like ask them about their rationale and like, you know, okay, what is this doing? How is this going to help me? You'll get a sense pretty quick of what they're all about and what is the approach doing. And is it addressing the real root of the issue, or is it just masking over the pain?
Yeah.
And just kind of getting you by till the next session, right?
Yeah. So I guess the advice would be trying to speak with someone before you go in and spend money on an appointment, if possible, to make sure that their expertise aligns with what you're looking for. But then also when you do go in for an appointment, ask questions continuously.
Yeah, and most people have pretty comprehensive descriptions of what they do. So just check it out, see what that therapist is all about.
Yeah.
And like, how does that resonate to you? And you know, I think you can get a good idea just from learning a little bit about people.
And my little piece of advice just to add on there is I have found that people will sometimes try one therapist that they think has all the tools in their toolbox to help. And then of course they're very disappointed when their pain doesn't get better or if it's not the right fit. So my piece of advice would just be to keep trying. Don't, you know, give up and assume you have to live your whole life in pain because one person wasn't able to help you. Every therapist has different areas of expertise and a different approach. And sometimes you have to try a few to find the right fit. And I know that sucks and that's not what people want to hear, but just keep trying. Don't just say, oh, I'm done, I'm broken, I have to live like this. That would be what I wish that everyone would know. I can only imagine how many people are sitting at home in pain thinking that they're going to be like that for forever. It would probably blow our minds if we had a statistic about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to get kind of discouraged, but I've seen so many things heal in pretty miraculous ways that I think it's important to kind of keep your hope up. And just, if you haven't found the answer yet, it just means that you haven't found the right thing yet. But most things have solutions. Right?
Keep trying.
I mean, it's a big world out there with a lot of different therapists and a lot of different tools and technologies and even new things emerging all the time. So there's a lot of answers there that we're just not aware of. So I think there's a lot of people I talk to who think that they've tried everything when really they've just tried like a couple things out of the multitude of options out there.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you give them an idea is if they're interested in working with you, or if they're interested in just, checking out Competitive Edge in general, why don't you give them an idea of how they can do so, how they can reach out to you, what you can provide?
Yeah, so people can always contact the clinic and book in for an initial assessment here. And usually what will happen is we'll go through like a 60-minute initial assessment. We'll examine the area that's painful and then look at how the muscles work around that area and discuss the history of the injury, do a little bit of treatment and kind of like summarize our findings. And then as we go through the treatment process, then we'll just be working on these inhibitory mechanisms and taking a corrective approach, right, through a combination of treatment and home exercise and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have a collaborative team here. So what I like to work on a lot is the inhibition and getting people strong and kind of improve their resilience. And then our athletic therapists here have their own take with things that they can do to retrain the body and help with, balance, proprioception, flexibility, mobility, and kind of add their take on it and a lot of corrective exercise. So I think together we work as a team to kind of really help people regain function and kind of like optimize that function as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Do you want to tell them about your class next month coming up?
Yeah, so as part of the Pain Free Club, we're going to be going over kind of a bunch of like fundamentals of exercise and strength training. There's a lot of little things that people don't know about in terms of like biomechanics and the way that you can do exercise in a way that's, just a little bit safer, a little bit more productive. So avoiding certain things that might be, harmful to your shoulders or harmful to your back or whatever, and just finding kind of an optimal way to do it. And it's really going to be kind of focused on like principles so that it's something that can be applied to anybody, whether they're into more like, heavy duty strength training, or they just want to do a little bit of light exercise at home. It's really going to be about principles. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. And I think one big barrier for people strengthening is the form. They're worried about worsening their injury or hurting themselves in a new way because they're not sure if they're doing it right or wrong. So this class is going to be really good for those people that have never done any kind of strengthening or weightlifting before, and they just, like you said, want to learn the principles and the basics that then they can progress on their own. And even for people that are experienced in weightlifting, might have little tweaks that they can make to make their form better, to avoid worsening their injury or getting a new one. Do you happen to remember the exact date that we set for that?
No.
No, off the top of my head, I can't remember the date, but it's in January 2022, coming up here. So if this is online, I'll put the exact date in the description box or whatever, and a link. If people are interested, they can sign up for that class as part of a free 2-week trial of the Pain Free Club. So we'll make sure that your trial overlaps with that class that Paul is doing, so you can make use of that. And then in addition, we also have a speak with a therapist option. So if someone has pain and they think it's related to some muscle inhibition, some weakness, that sort of thing, but you're not entirely sure, you can go to our website, and on our homepage, one of the options is to speak with a therapist. Just click that button, put in your information, and then you'll be set up to speak with Paul himself, and he can give you his expertise about what he thinks about your specific problem that you're in or the specific pain you're feeling, what he would recommend, and you can get some advice straight from the source. So that's an option too. If anyone's listening and wants a way to sort of reach out and get a little bit more information, that's a really good way to start. Paul, anything else to add? Any like parting words?
I think the main thing is probably just what we touched on last, that I know there's a lot of people who feel like they've tried everything and they've sort of run out of hope. And very few of those people have ever tried anything resembling a functional approach. And some really amazing stuff can happen when you fix function, because that's how you stop hurting the area that's affected, right?
Yeah.
And so really, really amazing stuff can happen when you take that approach. And maybe you're doing all the right things, but it was just the missing element. And so I would just encourage people to just kind of like be optimistic. There's other things out there that they probably haven't tried. And if they're interested in, taking a functional approach to treatment and increasing their strength and resiliency, I think that can help immensely with a lot of especially stubborn problems where people feel like they've tried it all.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Couldn't have said it better myself. Nothing else to add. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Paul. And for everyone that's either watching or listening, thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll have some more of these with our other therapists and their areas of expertise, and just shed some light on, like you said, what's possible. There's more avenues that people can go down to resolve their pain than what they think. So that's sort of my goal with this, is just to shed some light on what is possible and what is available, and hopefully help some people along the way.